There's a difference between discipline and faithfulness. Discipline is showing up every single day, even when you don't feel like it. Faithfulness is exercising discipline, even when you don't know where you're headed. Ballet forced me to learn that difference. My name is Aaron. Welcome to Faith and Reverence. As I mentioned previously, when I first started learning ballet at 29, I began by taking private lessons. I have a great private instructor and she's pushed me in a lot of ways and really it took a lot of discipline to show up to those classes and to continue to learn in those classes because it was a lot of stuff that I wasn't used to in my life, a lot of stretching, a lot of conditioning, and learning ballet, fundamental skills, and building a good, strong foundation. It took a lot of discipline. Now, when I took adult classes finally, even the beginner ones for that matter, it pushed me in a lot of other ways that I didn't expect. And it felt like there was a level of harder difficulty with the adult classes just because I wasn't able to go at a slower pace like we were able to during the private lessons. Let's say we did an exercise at the bar or in center or wherever, we were able to just stop and pause and maybe even take a minute or two or even longer if needed to be able to really talk about the exercise and to be able to address corrections and things of that nature. You can't really do that in an adult class. Sometimes I have some really good teachers here at Prince Ev Ballet Academy. They're very supportive and the teachers are great. So sometimes they do um take a minute or two to help me with corrections, but it's not too often that happens because I mean nor do I expect them to do that because we have too many people in the class. It's not a private lesson. So there was a lot of discomfort that was felt going into those classes, and it really showed me how difficult ballet really is in a lot of ways. I knew it was difficult, but those classes really revealed that to me, and I really started feeling like I was hitting a wall. I did feel that way from time to time in the private lessons as well with certain things, but now that I'm progressing and I'm going into more intermediate classes and things of that nature, I really felt like I would just hit a wall and then maybe after like a few weeks or a month of consistency, I would make a little bit of progress or have a slight mini breakthrough, but then I would hit a wall again. And in a lot of ways I continue to feel that way. I honestly think that ballet is one of the absolute most difficult things that you can do in life. There may be some things that are more difficult. I'm not here to rank them necessarily, but I truly believe that ballet, well, first, it is probably the most difficult thing I've ever done in my life. But I think that it's also one of the most difficult things that one can do in life. And, it does take a lot more than just discipline to get through ballet because you can show up every day consistently and exercise that discipline and you can work hard for weeks or months or years, but you'll have a lot of moments within that where you'll feel like you're making no progress at all. Now, granted, if you work for weeks and months and years on end and you show consistency with good training and good practice, you will make progress. Absolutely guaranteed. But you are going to have plenty of times within that process in which you are showing up every single day and you're thinking in your head, I don't feel like I'm making any progress right now. And you just have to trust that you are. And I felt that way all the time. I still feel that way sometimes. I still feel like I'm hitting walls and I'm in class for weeks on end, just trying to get one step right, and I can't do it. But then all of a sudden I make a breakthrough weeks or months later, and I look back and I say, man, I really did make so much progress, but I just didn't see it at the time. Now, this is where discipline isn't enough. This is where you need faithfulness because, as I said, you can show that discipline and exercise it every single day, but faithfulness is exercising that discipline and showing up every day, even when you don't know where the journey is going to take you, even when you don't know what's at the end of that road. As I said, I do believe this is God's calling on my life, ballet. but I don't know where this road's going to take me. I have some thoughts and some feelings as to what I would like to see or what I think God might do. But at the end of the day, I'm not God. I don't know what his plans are for my life. So I really don't know where this is taking me. And I've had doubts. Is this just God's calling on my life as a hobby that I'm very passionate about? I have a feeling that that's not the case. But regardless of that, there is still that doubt. I don't know where this is actually going to take me. And I just have to trust God, and I have to trust that showing faithfulness is the best thing that I can do, and just keep showing up day to day to day without actually knowing what the end result's going to be. Ballet taught me that faithfulness is not about feelings or emotion, it's actually about direction. Oftentimes, our feelings and our emotions deceive us. Those are a legitimate part of human nature and the way that God created us. I'm not saying you shouldn't listen to your feelings at all, because certainly sometimes they can be right in directing us. But I'm just saying that oftentimes our feelings do deceive us, and we are not actually called to live based on feelings. We're called to live based on truth. One specific example of faithfulness that comes to mind is the story of Abraham in the Bible. Abraham was a man who was at an old age, called by God to leave his land and his family and to go to a foreign land of which he knew nothing about. In fact, God didn't even tell him where he was being sent to. And Abraham was promised by God that he would be used by God to become the father of a great nation, which, by the way, was the nation of Israel. But God did not tell him where he was going. And I think this was just such a prime example of faithfulness, because Abraham went based on faith and exercised that discipline of having to travel in harsh conditions and with uncertainty of where he was even going and where he was going to end up, but trusting that God was going to do what he promised and was going to take care of him and bring him the best possible outcome for his life. I actually have a very personal story of faithfulness in my life, which I feel compelled to share with you. My daughter, she's nearly 4 years old now. There was a time where, because of the circumstances related to the situation and because of our far distance from each other, that I had to drive about 12 hours round trip every 2 weeks to see my daughter. This happened for a little over a year. This actually happened in the hometown where I grew up, and my grandmother, Sandy, was the last remaining relative of mine there. So naturally, we would have the visits at my grandmother's house, and I would stay there for the weekend. As I mentioned, this happened for a little over a year, having these visits, and it felt very inconvenient, all of that driving every 2 weeks. But my grandmother ended up getting cancer, and she didn't recover from it. She passed away. In retrospect, when I looked at everything, I realized that what seemed to be an inconvenience was actually a way that God was providing opportunities for me to be able to see my grandmother and spend a lot of quality time with her prior to her passing away. What felt like inconvenience was actually God preparing me for what was to come. And I didn't see that at the time, but I definitely see that now. And that definitely applies to everything in life, but it applies to my journey in ballet. It certainly has in a lot of ways, with me having to drive to and from the studio, spend late nights here, all of that stuff, and all of the opportunities that that's opened up for me through that faithfulness. But I know that I'll continue to see that. I'll continue to see the fruits of the faithfulness if I'm willing to continue to put that faithfulness in. And I certainly am willing to, because I know that God's will is greater than my own. And God really works out wonders in his timing for those who are faithful to him and his purpose that he calls upon their lives. Being faithful to God is really the most important thing, and being faithful to his calling on our lives. But I'll take it one step further and say that if we're not faithful to God's calling, then we're actually not being faithful to ourselves, because we have so much potential in life, and we may not choose to actually live out our lives to that full potential if we're not faithful to the calling. Ballet is that thing which requires so much discipline, but it also requires so much faithfulness. And ballet doesn't just teach movement, it teaches endurance and perseverance, and it just builds your character to the point where I've said some of these kids that have trained in ballet for most of their lives, even if they choose not to pursue a career in dance ultimately, even if they go into a different field, they're probably going to be all right. They're probably going to be very mature past what most other kids would be, and they're going to have discipline and a sense of faithfulness, and they're going to be prepared to handle the stresses of life better than they would have been able to had they have not done ballet. Discipline starts the journey and faithfulness completes it. Ballet has taught me that and life has confirmed it. I just want to encourage you to continue to stay faithful to whatever it is that you believe is God's calling on your life. Even if you're not really sure where you're going, even if you're not sure where God's going to take you, at the end of the day, none of us really know for sure where God's going to take us or where we're going to end up. But we need to have faithfulness and we need to trust that God's plan really is the best and that his will is a perfect will and that he will bring good things into our lives, great things, as long as we trust him to do so and we stay faithful. I hope you guys are enjoying the vlog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel, leave a comment and let me know how you are choosing to go forward in faithfulness, how you are choosing to be more intentional about showing up, and what it is that you might be uncertain about in your life and you don't know exactly where God's taking you, but you feel like it's where you need to be and that it's your calling. Just share that with me. I'd love to hear about that, and keep moving forward in faith and with reverence.